These are the stories making the headlines at this hour. South Korea's senior official says North Korea could possibly launch an intercontinental ballistic missile sometime this month. To better counter such threats, South Korea, the U.S. and Japan have been working to start sharing real-time data on North Korean missiles by the end of this year. The latest economic data suggests that South Korea is showing signs of recovery and a rebound in exports. Authorities vow to keep the momentum amid geopolitical risks and supply chain disruptions. U.S. stocks continue to rally on Thursday on hopes of rate cuts, with the Dow Jones closing at a record high for the second day in a row. The 10-year Treasury yield also jumped further to hit below 4%. Good afternoon. North Korea could possibly launch an intercontinental ballistic missile sometime this month, according to South Korea's senior official. To better counter such threats, South Korea, the U.S. and Japan have been working to start sharing real-time data on North Korean missiles by the end of this year. Bae-eun-ji has the details.
A senior presidential official has said there is a possibility that North Korea could launch an intercontinental ballistic missile this month. The first deputy chief of the National Security Office, Kim Tae-yo, said this as he arrived in Washington, D.C. for a high-profile meeting. He did not elaborate on what intelligence led him to believe so, or if related information has been shared with the U.S., but added that a ballistic missile launch using ICBM technology is a subject of extended deterrence discussions between Seoul and Washington. He also noted that regardless of the range of the ballistic missile, if a nuclear weapon is loaded onto it, it is a nuclear threat and an attack against South Korea. Kim is scheduled to take part in the second meeting of the Nuclear Consultative Group, a security meeting designed to discuss nuclear and strategic planning issues between Seoul and Washington. In the meantime, South Korea, the U.S., and Japan plan to start sharing data on North Korean missiles in real time. The Pentagon spokesperson said in a briefing on Thursday local time that the three countries are working together to operationalize the system by the end of 2023.
That we are hard at work on delivering on those agreements. We are on schedule to deliver by the end of this year.
His remarks come a day after the White House National Security Council Senior Director for East Asia and Oceania, Mira Rapp-Hooper, said the data sharing system is expected to become operational within the next few days. Earlier in August, the leaders of the three countries agreed to step up efforts to counter evolving North Korean nuclear missile threats. Bae-eun-ji, Arirang News.
U.S. lawmakers have passed the final defense policy bill for next year, which includes keeping American troops in South Korea at the current level. The House and Senate on Wednesday passed the fiscal year 2024 National Defense Authorization Act, approving $886 billion of defense spending, up 3% on year. The act includes maintaining the current number of 28,500 U.S. armed forces in South Korea, strengthening the U.S. commitment to providing extended deterrence to Seoul, and requiring the Pentagon to report on the latest progress in transferring wartime operational control from the U.S. to South Korea. The bill will now go to President Joe Biden for his final signature. President Yoon and First Lady Kim have returned home this morning from a state visit to the Netherlands. During the president's three-day visit, South Korea and the Netherlands forged a semiconductor alliance and vowed to upgrade their cooperation in a variety of fields, including defense and future technology. On the last day, President Yoon attended a Korean cultural performance with Dutch King Willem-Alexander and Queen Maxima on Wednesday evening, which the presidential office says was a gesture of gratitude for the king's invitation for the state visit, the first to be made by a South Korean leader to the Netherlands. Now, over in Gaza, Israel says it will take several months for Hamas to be defeated. The comments come despite reports that serious talks are underway for another ceasefire in the war-torn area. Lee Seung-jae has more.
During U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan's visit to Tel Aviv, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant told the White House official that the war could last more than several months for Hamas to be defeated. Gallant told Sullivan that the Palestinian militant group had built infrastructure under the ground and above the ground, making it difficult to destroy them all. During Sullivan's visit, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stressed that his country will continue to fight until absolute victory against Hamas is achieved. Meanwhile, a senior official from Hamas said Thursday that serious talks are underway to revive the ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. According to Germany's DPA news agency, the Hamas said Qatari and Egyptian officials are negotiating with Israel and the United States on behalf of the militant group. He added that there will be no exchange of Israeli hostages or Palestinian prisoners until the ceasefire goes into effect. With around 327,000 cases of infectious diseases being detected in Gaza, a spokesperson for the Palestinian Ministry of Health warns that Gaza faces the spread of epidemics, infectious diseases, malnutrition, and the lack of clean drinking water and personal hygiene. The chief spokesperson for UNICEF also warned that the perfect storm for disease has begun in the region, with 21 of the Gaza Strip's 36 hospitals closed. Gaza's health officials warned that diseases are spreading even faster, with many displaced in overcrowded shelters. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The latest economic data suggests that South Korea is showing signs of recovery and a rebound in exports. Authorities vow to keep the momentum amid geopolitical risk and supply chain disruptions. Park Gun-woo with the details.
South Korea's economic slowdown is continuing to ease, according to the Finance Ministry's monthly economic green book released on Friday. The ministry said the economic slowdown is gradually easing due to recovery in production and manufacturing industry exports, including semiconductors, and in employment figures. In contrast, the report highlighted a drop in retail sales in October, as well as low economic sentiment over the previous months, while the composite consumer sentiment index for November dropped 0.9 percentage points on month. The ministry said it would need to come up with solutions to narrow these discrepancies. Meanwhile, total exports in November came to $55.8 billion, an increase of 7.8% on year. By item, 12 out of 15 major exporting items, including ships, vehicles, and chips, saw an increase. And 6 out of 9 main outbound shipping regions, including the US, Japan, and India, saw a jump in exports as well. In terms of employment in November, 277,000 jobs were added on year, a smaller increase than the month before due to the base effect caused by eased COVID-19 measures. Though unemployment increased by 11,000, the unemployment rate was the same as last year at 2.3%. At a briefing on Friday, a finance ministry official also cited global uncertainties, including geopolitical risks from ongoing wars and unstable supply chains that could hinder economic recovery, adding the government would strengthen efforts toward economic recovery despite the uncertainties.
The government will focus on stabilizing people's livelihoods, including consumer prices, and further strengthen efforts so that the export recovery expands to the whole economy.
Park Gun-woo, Arirang News.
South Korea's food exports hit an all-time high for the first 11 months of the year on the popularity of instant noodles and kimchi. According to the Agricultural and Food Ministry, the value of food exports from January to November period came to nearly $83 billion, up 2.4% from the previous year. The record high food exports were mostly driven by outbound shipments of ramyeon and kimchi, which rose nearly 26% and 10% respectively. By market, shipments to China and the United States both rose compared to a year earlier. U.S. stocks continued to rally on Thursday on hopes of rate cuts, with the Dow Jones closing at a record high for the second day in a row. The 10-year Treasury yield also dropped further to hit below 4%. An Sung-jin reports.
U.S. stocks and other economic indicators are up on expectations that the Federal Reserve will cut its interest rates next year. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, a stock market index of 30 prominent companies listed on stock exchanges in the U.S., closed at a record high on Thursday. Its rally continued after Wednesday's market closed above 37,000 for the first time ever. The Nasdaq also closed 0.2% higher, and the S&P 500 closed 0.3% higher on Thursday. Meanwhile, the 10-year Treasury note dropped below 4% for the first time since August, as traders expected rate cuts 3 times in 2024. Following the Federal Open Market Committee's announcement that it may lower interest rates, the U.S. dollar also dropped to a 4-month low. On the back of weaker dollars, oil prices settled 3% higher as the West Texas Intermediate contract for January settled at $71.58 a barrel. As inflation shows signs of easing in the U.S., retail sales in November climbed 0.3%, seeing a rebound from the 0.2% decline in October. Forecasts that the U.S. could lower its interest rates are seen as a positive for South Korea's economy and could allow the Bank of Korea to lower its interest rates. This may stabilize South Korea's property market and reduce household loan costs. However, South Korea's inflation remains high, and even if the Bank of Korea does drop its interest rates are unlikely to fall to the COVID-19 pandemic level of 1 or 2%. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
The European Central Bank has held its interest rate steady for the second consecutive time. The bank's governing council announced on Thursday it will keep the main base rate at 4.5%, with no suggestion of any potential rate cut. Despite the recent slowdown in inflation, ECB President Christine Lagarde expects a temporary rise in inflation in the near future as price pressures remain strong. The decision means there's still a 1 percentage point gap between the Eurozone and South Korea's rate of 3.5%. Starting today, South Korea is expanding telemedicine services, where patients can consult with doctors through their computer, tablet PC, or smartphone. Now, patients in all age groups can access the services, which will also be allowed after 6 p.m. and on holidays. Yoon has the details.
In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, telemedicine services were first initiated in South Korea in 2020. And starting Friday, the contactless healthcare service will be expanded as part of the government's efforts to address gaps in medical care services. Telemedicine services have already been available for people residing in remote areas like islands and mountainous and isolated areas at night and on holidays. But now the services will be extended to 98 additional cities, counties, and districts identified as medically vulnerable areas starting December 15th. These are areas where the percentage of residents unable to reach a regional emergency medical center within 30 minutes exceeds 30%. The Health Ministry has also expanded the age group of people allowed to receive prescriptions using the telemedicine services. Those aged under 18 were only allowed contactless counseling services after 6 p.m. and on holidays, but now the service will be available to all age groups, including prescriptions. Contactless healthcare has also been expanded nationwide to allow returning patients to receive telemedicine treatment for general illnesses if they have any previous medical treatment records at the same hospital in the previous 6 months. For returning patients with specific or chronic diseases, they need to have treatment records for that disease at the same hospital in the previous 30 days. Previously, the services had only been available for returning patients with diseases like diabetes or hyperphagia. Morning after pills are prohibited from the prescription list. Yoon, Arirang News.
It was a tough year for Asian economies, which had to deal with the impact of geopolitical tensions, sanctions, and trade barriers. Now, what lies ahead as the region heads into a new year? To discuss the prospects, our Moon Hae-ryun spoke with the Asian Development Bank's chief economist.
Amid external conflict and unusual weather posing challenges this year, Asia's economic outlook going into 2024 remains solid. The Asian Development Bank's December report on Wednesday showed the region's growth has been upbeat on the back of strong domestic demand and the recovery in the tourism sector. However, the agency's chief economist, Albert Park, discussed how certain trends are affecting the region's economies.
So, unfortunately, we live in a world where there's been a lot of geopolitical kind of tensions, and we've had sanction regimes, trade wars, and other industrial policies that are kind of erecting barriers to free trade. And we think that's not healthy for the region because Asia in particular historically has really benefited a lot from open trade and export-led growth.
As well as geopolitical tensions, other factors such as unusual weather and slowing global demand in certain industries have raised concerns about supply chains. South Korea has experienced food security challenges as a result of the heat wave which swept through the country this summer. And recent disruptions in urea exports from China have highlighted a need to reduce dependence on a single source of key materials.
We hope that countries can think together about how to make, number one, make agriculture more resilient to supply shocks, but then also think ahead and come up with plans where countries do not overly restrict their trade when there is a negative shock, because that really hurts the most vulnerable countries, and to think about instead protecting consumers through more targeted policy measures.
Despite these headwinds, the ADB revised its 2023 growth estimate for Asia, raising it by 0.2 percentage points from its earlier forecast in September. Its projection for South Korea remained unchanged, but the country's main export sector could be seeing a recovery.
Well, we're cautiously optimistic. Not just Korea, but the global semiconductor market has kind of bottomed out earlier this year, and we're seeing a recovery in global demand. The U.S. economy is growing a bit faster, than we had expected earlier, which helps.
With the Fed's decision to keep interest rates steady for the third consecutive month on Thursday, it's predicted to lower rates in 2024, which is welcome news for the region.
I think the lower interest rates are better for the region because high interest rates really put financial pressure. It raises the cost of capital and investment. It leads to kind of capital flowing out of the region and gives pressure on countries to raise their interest rates in response to the higher U.S. Fed rate.
With these economic trends expected to continue, governments will have to form policies targeted at sustainable growth. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. The European Union on Thursday decided to open accession negotiations with Ukraine and Moldova and to grant candidate status to Georgia. Ukraine's aspiration to join the European Union had been long opposed by the Hungarian Prime Minister Orban, who had previously vetoed the move. However, at Thursday's summit in Brussels, Orban left the room in a pre-agreed and constructive manner as the voting began, leaving the 26 other leaders to vote unanimously for the motion. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said this decision was a victory for Ukraine, a victory for all of Europe, and that history is made by those who don't get tired of fighting for freedom. Moldovan President Maia Sandu also welcomed the decision. Thursday's decision, however, does not guarantee EU membership status for either of the countries. The negotiation process may take years to finalize. The World Health Organization on Thursday urged governments to ban all flavored e-cigarettes. The UN Health Agency said on Thursday that urgent measures are required to control electronic cigarettes, as researchers suggest there is little evidence vaping can reduce smoking or is a healthier alternative. The WHO cited studies to state that e-cigarettes can drive nicotine addiction among non-smokers, especially children and young adults. The WHO Director General said kids are being recruited and trapped at an early age to use e-cigarettes and may get hooked to nicotine. In sports news, the English Premier League has announced its first female referee. The Professional Game Match Officials Limited confirmed on Thursday that Rebecca Welch will officiate Fulham's game against Burnley on December 23rd. 40-year-old Welch has over 10 years of experience as a football referee and in January became the first female to referee a men's championship game. Sam Allison will become the first black top-flight referee in 15 years when he oversees Sheffield United versus Luton Town on December 26th. In July, the Football Association announced plans to recruit 50% more referees from historically underrepresented backgrounds by 2026. Currently, only 3% of referees in professional football are of black or Asian ethnicity. In the US, a loose ball in New Jersey found its way to Newark Penn Station on Thursday morning, causing about an hour's delay for trains traveling to New York. The ball was first seen standing on the train tracks at the New Jersey station at around 11 a.m. local time. Local police cornered the ball about 5 kilometers away from the station and safely captured it. New York City's public safety director said that the ball will be sent to a local animal sanctuary. Kim Si-young, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. It has been raining all day and will rain through most of the day, but mountainous regions in Gangwon-do province will continue to see snow instead. Southern provinces will see 10 to 60 millimeters of more showers, while the capital area could see 5 to 20 millimeters of more rain. Mountainous regions in Gangwon-do could see more than 30 centimeters of snowfall, with heavy snow alerts being issued there, so please stay safe. It was a rainy but balmy start to the day, and afternoon highs will go up similar to slightly lower than yesterday, along with strong winds. Busan topping out at 19 degrees, Jeju at 20 degrees this afternoon. Still quite warmer than seasonal norms. The rain will take a break tonight before making its return tomorrow morning with a big freeze. Highs on Saturday will be minus 3 degrees here in Seoul, and Sunday's lows will plunge to minus 11. So if you plan to be outside tomorrow, make sure to dress in extra layers. Then bone chilling temperatures will stay longer than they are welcome. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
Now, all BTS members are serving their mandatory military service, but their charting streak continues. Their hit song Spring Day, which was released 6 years ago, briefly hit #1 on the iTunes Top Songs chart in 83 regions, including the US, Japan, and France, outpacing Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas Is You. It also topped Japan's Oricon Daily Song chart. Co-composed by RM and Suga, the song yearns for a reunion with long-lost friends, with repeated lines of 보고 싶다 or I miss you in English. Perhaps the message ARMY is sending to the band. Now will be some time before BTS release any new music, but their Spring Day seems likely to continue. That is all for today. Thanks for watching.
반대편까지가 겨울을 끝내봐 그리움들이 얼마나 눈치를 내려야 그 봄날이 올까 더운 걸 떠드는 차